Hi, it's Tim. Just before we get into this week's edition of Blind Like Me, I want to remind you of my other two podcasts that you can check out, Inside Today's Country and Corkscrewed. You can find links to both of those at my website, timblackonair.com. As well, Blind Like Me is looking for a sponsor. We'd like to align your business with this podcast that reaches people in Canada, the U.S., and around the world. To find out more information, go to my website, timblackonair.com.
This is Blind Like Me.
Hello, everyone.
Interviews, information, and reviews related to living with a vision disability. Your host is Tim Black. Tim has been visually impaired since birth. He's been in radio for 30 years and also hosts the podcast Inside Today's Country. Tim has never let his lack of vision stand in his way.
Well, welcome to this week's edition of Blind Like Me. This week, we head to Denver, Colorado, and meet up with Gail Hamilton. Gail reached out to me via email to ask if she could come on the podcast to tell her story. And an interesting story it is. Gail is a twin. She grew up with parents who did not accept her blindness. She's the very first blind female opera singer. She's written a book, and she's a motivational speaker. From Denver, Colorado, we welcome Gail Hamilton to the podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us, Gail.
Oh, I love hanging out with you. It's so much fun.
So let's find out a little bit about you. I mean, I kind of did it in the Coles Note versions there, but your information sheet that you sent along about yourself, you've been a very busy lady over the years, which I think one of the neat comments is that you learned to play music, and your music teacher basically said, the fact that you were somebody who was a musician first and then a blind person second.
Yeah, my voice teacher used to always say that when I got my master's in Pittsburgh, Kansas. I think that was one of the times that kind of edified me as a person. But she would say, you're not just a blind singer. You're a singer that just happens to be blind.
Mm-hmm.
And that, under her, I got to sing 2 operas. I was the leading role in La Boheme with being Mimi, and then I was the leading role in La Traviata with being Violetta.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, it was really fun. And because she saw me just as a singer, then we just had to do special accommodations and with orchestra and costumes, the whole bit. And that was back in the day when blind people weren't doing that kind of thing.
Exactly. Well, let's find out a little bit about you. Let's go way back and tell me your story then.
Once upon a time, way long time ago, my brain went weird. So I was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, 1953. My parents were upper middle class. They had money, but they didn't really know how to do the love or accept people with disabilities or any of that. I was born 2.5 months premature, weighed 2.5 pounds. Let's see. Oh, I'm a twin. So they put us in incubators. Yeah. And put 100% pure oxygen in the incubator for 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was partially sighted to 11, and then totally blind with cataracts at 11. And then like 15 years ago, I had both my eyes removed and have prosthetics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's quite an interesting life for you then.
Well, always is.
Always is. That's right. And,
Always is.
and is that kind of how you look at life? It's interesting. It's a challenge, and it's it's just life.
Pretty much. You can be victimized by your circumstances, or you can be empowered by them. And I've been a victim for 50 years, and I think the last 17, I've decided, I think empowerment works much nicer than being a victim.
Mm-hmm. Now, going back, obviously, to the to the 60s when you were in school, and in 60s and 70s and so forth like that.
Yep.
I mean, that was when, as you alluded to earlier, that blind people weren't supposed to be doing things. We were supposed to be basket weavers or whatever.
Yep.
What
Cane chairs.
That's right. What was life like for you going to school back in the day?
Back in the day, back in my day, I went to a school for the blind in Indiana. I went through first grade to 8th grade, and that's where I learned Braille music and Braille, and math Braille and all that. And I don't think I knew it then, but they were 3 years behind in education, and where the public schools were 3 years, or the parochial school anyway, was 3 years ahead of education. Um, I was fortunate. I got to go home every day. I lived like 8 minutes away from the school, and so I went home every day and then came back for classes. And I had partial sight, so honestly, I was. It's interesting because there's a hierarchy of blindness,
Hmm.
and the kids that had more sight, they were more treated normally, maybe
Hmm.
I'll say,
Hmm.
than the people that the less sight you had, the less kind of valuable you were, or respectable, or whatever term you want to use.
Right.
And so I felt, and then since I was a day student, I was looked down upon as, oh, you're you're too uppity to go to school with us because we spend all of our time at the school and you don't, and so you're not really one of us. So I wasn't really accepted there
Oh,
in a
really?
in a
Okay.
way.
Hmm.
Yeah, in a way I was, because I was just as blind as they were, but and we had our own cliques, and but the blind people tended to the totals tended to hang out with the totals, and the partially sighted tended to hang out with the partially sighted.
Hmm.
And but going from that, and interesting, later on when I went to parochial high school, and then somehow I heard that some of the kids at the school for the blind didn't know what a whole banana looked like, and that people had always cut them up for them.
Hmm.
And it's like, really? I always knew what a whole banana looked like. So that was interesting. And they didn't do, back in my day, we didn't do mobility at all. No cane travel,
Oh, really?
none of that.
Okay.
Yeah, none of that. I didn't have any. The first time I got cane travel was between my freshman and sophomore year when I was in a parochial high school, and the sisters said to my parents, "We can't keep carting her around from class to class, so you got to get her away to learn how to walk on her own."
Hmm.
And then my parents hated it because if a cane, then I looked more blind than without, in their mind.
Right.
Of course, running into a wall to me kind of looks a little bit blind. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, so
Right.
just thinking, I don't know, or shuffling your feet, or sticking your hands out in front of you. I don't know, falling over the whatever's in your way. I think that kind of looks a little bit blind,
Hmm.
but they never let me use a cane when I was with them, and my mom was so embarrassed by me. Uh, People looking at me because I
Hmm.
had the cane and all that.
Hmm.
Even years later, when I had a CNI dog, I remember one time going to a family reunion, and I got myself and my dog all ready, and she said, "Oh, you're not going," and everybody else in the family was going, but I wasn't. So, and it was just because I'm blind, or I had the dog, or whatever reason
Hmm.
she chose to. So they were very visual people, and I embarrassed her, I guess. But uh, sidebar, uh, at the end of both of their lives, my dad ended up with a colonoscopy, and my mom ended up with a stroke, and she had tubes out of her neck. So I'm kind of thinking, I don't know, I think I'd rather be blind than having all that. So
No doubt. Yeah.
they kind of got their just dessert. Yeah.
I'm surprised that of them being embarrassed by you because they're your daughter, and you're
Yeah.
obviously you're a twin. So there's obviously a sister involved. And why were they embarrassed? Like that boggles my mind.
Because they were visual people,
Mm.
and it's all about the looks, and
Hmm.
my eyes didn't look normal, and I didn't look normal, so
Hmm.
therefore I was an embarrassment to me. Yeah, they didn't edify. Where they should have nurtured, empowered, and guided me,
Hmm.
they did the opposite. They,
Hmm.
isolation, negativity, and discrimination in a way. So they just, whatever they could do to out of sight, out of mind kind of mentality,
Hmm.
was kind of their game.
Hmm.
So they wouldn't have to, they didn't want to see me, so they did whatever they could do to kind of think that they could hide me.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is dysfunctional family dynamic for sure.
Yeah. Our world has changed a little bit in that way, but there are still some kinds of signs of people who are still not totally accepting anybody with with either a visual or a physical disability in our society today.
Yeah, I think it's one of the last frontiers to get total acceptance with. They say they're better, but if they're better, why is there 60 to 90% unemployment?
Mm-hmm.
That's before the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So
we still have
if
a
we're
we still
really
have a long way to
accepting,
go.
I would think,
Yeah.
much less mental disabilities.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what you did as a career then.
Well, as a career, when it came that time, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Right. We all have
I
that
said,
question
well,
asked.
I know. It's like, I still do sometimes. What am I doing? But I decided that I loved music and I liked playing piano. And I tried to get out of it for the longest time because I'm a teenager and that's what teenagers do.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually when it came time, it's like, well, music's kind of the only thing I can do. And I love singing ever since my first voice lesson. So once I discovered that, that it was really like, yeah, this is fun. So I went into music because that was where my passion was. And I liked writing even from the get-go too.
Mm-hmm.
And so interesting that's kind of where I tend to go nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But I got a bachelor's of arts degree and with voice and for my major and in piano, organ, speech, and English for my minors.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went off to get my master's in music and faced a lot of discrimination there too, though, because people couldn't see how there could be a blind person that was an opera singer.
Mm-hmm.
So that didn't really work out in a way. So then I went and got a doctorate or tried in music and got some more discrimination there. How can you be a teacher of music when you're blind?
Mm-hmm.
And then I went and did a master's in psychology and counseling, thinking, well, if I can't do the music thing, I surely counseling doesn't require eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But I had people say the same thing there too. Oh, you can't be a psychotherapist because you can't see them. It's like, it might take me a little bit longer time to figure out that they were crying versus somebody that could see the tears fall.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the end of the day, I still figured out what was going on and still got it out of them and still could be a therapist. But after a while, there was, it was hard again in discrimination. So then I kind of went into speaking and decided to write a book. And I built a Habitat for Humanity house. And I was also actually Miss Colorado Senior America as well. So, yeah, I've done a lot of
You've done a lot of
cool
stuff.
things the last 15 years have been pretty fun.
Let's talk a little bit about learning how to do opera, because obviously that's, as you say, there was people who say there's never going to be a way that you're going to do that. So how did you overcome that?
I had my music in Braille, and I actually devised my own vocal Braille music system that I lined up the notes and the words above each other like they do in print music. And so that way I could learn what syllable went with what notes and all the way through. So my voice teacher and I devised that compared to the way that the traditional vocal music system's written. And then just as far as being on stage, we did, when I was Mimi, there was a scene where I had to come from backstage and then I had to go to a gazebo. And I don't know now. I played Violetta and Mimi as sighted people, but I don't know now if I would. I think it'd be kind of interesting to play them as blind because, after all, that's what I am. So, wouldn't it have been interesting if I would have taken a cane out and found a gazebo or walked around? Like, why not?
Why not?
Bash it. There,
found
why
it.
not?
There you go. Why
Found
not?
it. There it is. I know. But back then, I said, no, I'm going to be a purist and all that. So they put a cable from backstage to the, a couple feet away from the gazebo.
Yeah.
And they painted it black and they put a piece of tape over it. And then I had ballet slippers and I had skirts down to the floor. So I just would run my feet along the cable until I got till it ended. And then I knew the gazebo was coming up, so
Ingenious.
that's how we did. Yeah. So that's how we did that. I don't remember too many other accommodations. I remember that one for sure. I remember one time in La Traviata, I had a scene with my lover's father, and I was walking around and being distraught, and he was talking me into not marrying his son because I was beneath his son and blah, blah, blah. And I got lost wandering around in all this space. And I'm kind of going, oh, let's just go back to the table, but I can't find the table. And I'm kind of thinking this as I'm singing and being distraught. And I'm kind of going, but the leading man was really with the program, and all of a sudden he just started drumming his fingers on the table.
Okay.
He must have realized, you know,
Right,
and
right.
so I went, there's the table. Oh, thank God. You know, woo, you know, and
Somebody's
it's
always
great.
willing to help.
Yeah, well, he was. He ended up being a tenor for the Metropolitan Opera, so
Oh, wow.
that was pretty cool. So he was very savvy.
Excellent. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit about the book you wrote. What's it all about?
The book is all about my life from birth all the way through the first 60 years. So being crowned queen of the Miss Colorado Senior America pageant and fourth runner-up in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was 7 years ago, but I'm still the queen.
Of course. You can't let that
Yeah, of
go.
course. No, I got the tiara. I could go put that on, you know. Tiara on top of the earphones. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had family abuse, and I had relationships and suicidal ideation, and just, you know, and then just the traumas of growing up, and the 5 CNI dogs, and then of course the love of my grandma, because people say, well, what got you through all the hard stuff? And it's like, well, my grandma, you know, that's what got me through all that. And believing in something bigger than me, and all that. And so then it's how did I change my attitude from the victim to the creator, and then how did I go and then started creating a life of greatness, because the book is Soaring into Greatness. So how did I go from totally traumatized and totally victim and totally being withdrawn and invisible and discounted and devalued, and totally from that to being a speaker and motivating and all that. So overcoming the obstacles and getting on the other side.
Let's get the title of your book one more time.
Soaring into Greatness.
And you can find that pretty much, is that everywhere? Amazon and so forth?
Everywhere. Amazon, Audible, Kindle, and Bard for people who are visually impaired.
Excellent. Isn't that great? Now let's talk about motivational speaking, because I know that's something that I know you sent a video along with you doing some motivational speaking. When did you start doing that, and why did that happen?
You know, somebody asked me that the other day. It's like, I don't know. I think because I've always been a performer. So I think it went hand in hand. And I think I went from performer, well, I still perform too, and I play piano and auto harp and all that, but went from doing all that to, would you like to do that in schools? Okay, so I go play auto harp in schools. Of course, you're going to talk to the kids while you're in school. And then somebody might have said, well, would you like to come up and talk to my class in the college? Well, sure, I'll come talk to them. And so it just sort of spread it out from that. And it's a natural thing to go from singing to speaking. And I do both in my presentations. I'll sing the aria I won the Miss Colorado with, and then I'll speak, and then I'll do a inspiration song or something else at the end.
What's your message?
So, what is my message? Well, one of the philosophy I won with for the Miss Colorado is, I believe my desire to fly must be bigger than my fear of falling. Vision is internal, not external, and is guided by my heart, not my eyes. In order to be free to fly, I must want my dream, feel my dream, and believe that my dream will come true. Most importantly, I must live my dream. I'm the creator of my destiny, the composer of my symphony, and I choose to live a life of greatness. So that's my 35-second philosophy, and that's kind of what I totally believe in every day. It's my mantra. My message is that we're not alone, that we all can overcome whatever the it is in our life, that nothing's impossible, that you have to, it's a matter of having a positive attitude attitude of gratitude, but to be in alignment to whatever brings you joy and whatever your passion is, and then to take some action step every day towards that dream, your goal, your passion, your desire. And I think another one of my sayings is I kind of follow it by the senses in our body. So you have to see with eyes of imagination. You have to hear with ears of like you're listening, your inner voice. Speak words of truth. Follow your heart with compassion and kindness. Touch, reach out, and serve others. Walk with steps of action, and then connect with your source, your divine power, your that part of you. And so that's sort of my 7 steps. But, so yeah, I have lots of messages that we all can do whatever it is. That nothing should stop us. Anything is totally possible.
Right. Exactly. I mean, we have to look to our positive world and be positive. We've been given the challenges, and people have been given the challenges that they have, but you have to, run with those challenges. I know I was always taught, being visually impaired was raised in a household as a normal child because my parents wanted me to be normal. They didn't want me to go to a special school for the blind I grew up in Victoria. Didn't want to go to a special school in Vancouver. And so I was raised as a sighted child, but I was visually impaired. And I've always been, always was taught that, yes, you do have challenges, and life is always going to be a challenge, but you have to grab onto that challenge and run with it and make the best of it.
And then there's a part, the therapist to me says, you can't totally deny the challenge. Like, it would be just silly for me to go, oh, I'm not blind. Now you said that, raise parents to be, they raised you to be normal. I think that's what my parents were trying to do, except being totally blind. I did run into the wall. So a tool like a cane would have been helpful.
Yeah, no doubt.
Instead of totally being into being denial of it. And so but in a way, I think being raised normal is good. I'd rather have that way than the pity way. Because,
I totally agree with you.
Because you're blind. Yeah. So
and I agree with what you said earlier in the podcast. There was people that I had met in my younger days because I went to regular school. I was the first visually impaired person to go through regular school in British Columbia, and I met other visually impaired and blind people who went to Jericho Hill in Vancouver. And their social/educational skills were a good couple of years behind. And I always felt bad for those folks. And I was the person that they would ask, like, well, how do you do this? And how do you navigate through life for this? And I always honestly felt bad that they had never been given that opportunity to, as I say, live a normal, quote unquote, life, because that's what my parents gave me. I mean, yes, I was visually impaired and we had to fight for every tooth and nail and get things in large print and so forth, and the technology and help and so forth. But these other kids, and unfortunately, the bigger part of the picture is eventually you're going to be out of school and you have to be able to, function normally in a normal society, or quote unquote, whatever is a normal society. Right.
And so often people have low expectations of blind people or visually impaired people, or all that, and it's like, that stops people. And
last week we were talking about to a young lady who's in Ottawa, Canada, and she is visually impaired, and she is in becoming a scientist. She's doing, working for the pharmaceutical companies and being a scientist. And she's visually impaired, and she's had a challenge her entire life, but they're adapting things for her to become a scientist because that's what she wants to do. And I applaud people who take that. It's the world. I always love this quote that was, the world's your oyster. You just got to kind of grab onto it and run with it, right?
You reminded me a while ago about, I was always the trailblazer too. Maybe because my parents denied that I was blind, but I was the first blind person in my high school and in my college and my master's, and both my masters in the opera and the Miss America, first blind person, and the first single blind person to build a Habitat for Humanity house here in Denver. So
that's wild.
I've always been that. Yeah, I've always been that person, and because I always ask people, well, how do you do it as a sighted person? whatever the it is, like be Miss America, and how do you do this and how do you do that, and then I go, okay, here's how I'm going to do it,
Right.
and it usually works out. But
Right.
yeah,
Now, what do you say to other visually impaired and blind people? Because I know you're talking to, when you go to schools, you're probably talking to the sighted world. But what's your message for other visually impaired and blind people?
and the back of my book I have, and if I just had known this, I could pull it out. But I have a thing called Pearls of Wisdom, and I kind of address kids that are blind, teachers that are teaching the blind, ophthalmologists. I have like 20 different categories. I write a little paragraph about. But to people that are blind, that you can do it, you can overcome whatever it is. Don't let your blindness be your burden or your weight. Let it be your wings. That you have the ability to do whatever the it is. Don't let other people stop you. You know what you can do, and go out there and do it, for Pete's sakes. And don't be the victim. Show people what you can do, and tell people you want them to have higher expectations of you, and be your own advocate and your own champion, because you know it.
And again, what would you
Off
say?
the top of my head.
And what would you say to the sighted community? What message would you want to pass on to the sighted community?
I think sighted people need to hold us up to higher expectations too. Don't presume that we can't do whatever that it is, because most of the time we can. We just might have to make different adaptations. But it's your blindness in a way that makes us disabled, and to be quite blunt. And so open your own eyes and see what we can do, because most likely we will surprise you. And we are really pretty loyal. If you hire us, we're gonna, because we haven't been employed as much as maybe people who are sighted, well, but realistically, we're going to work our tails off to prove to you that we can hold a job, and we can do whatever that it is too, and that we are capable. And we usually, blindness isn't what's holding us back, and it's other people's short-sightedness that is. So give us a chance. We're going to prove you more than right.
Our world needs to be more inclusive.
And we're just like you. We just don't see.
That's right. Yep, I totally agree. I totally agree with that. Let's talk about your website.
Yeah, soaringintogreatness.com. And I do have Pearls of Wisdom out there on there now, and blogs, and of course my email's out there. You can email me, and you can get my book. You can sign up for that, even through that, if you forget anything else, Audible. But yeah, so
excellent. Gail,
check me out.
We certainly will, and we're going to put all the links and so forth in the show notes, so that people can just link right to your website and grab a copy of your book. Cool. and read all about it. Gail, it has been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you very much for reaching out to us. I'm really, really glad you did, and I'm glad we had this opportunity to find out about you and hear your message, and we wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It was very much fun.
Thanks for listening to Blind Like Me. If you have a comment or suggestion about future casts, drop us an email to blindlikeme@outlook.com. Blind Like Me is a TimBlackOnAir.com production.